Welcome to Tampa Home Talk with your host, native Tampa real estate girl, Katrina Madewell, a full-time, passionate, out-of-the-box thinker, love for home ownership kind of realtor with over 21 years of combined mortgage and real estate experience. Tune in every week at this time for expert advice on everything you need to know about home ownership, finance, maintaining great credit, building wealth, and making your everyday life better, and how you can be financially successful today and tomorrow. Remember, love where you live or let Katrina fix it. Now, here's your host of Tampa Home Talk, Katrina Madewell.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us here this Saturday and afternoon on Tampa Home Talk. I'm your host, Katrina Madewell. You're listening to us on the Real Estate Radio Network. Very proud to have our special guest in studio today. No stranger to Tampa Home Talk. He's been with us before on our past station that we came over from. But Chad Dudek is our guest for the day with Geological. And he's got 17 years in the industry. He comes from a background of just soil settlement issues and just has a whole scientific background behind when stuff starts to settle and what it means. And I know that if you were listening to our show recently, a couple weeks ago, we had guests on with regards to this whole topic. We're going to dive in a little bit deeper into some of the process today. If you missed the past show here on Tampa Home Talk, you definitely are going to want to check it out because our guest for the prior show talked all about the genetic makeup of Florida. So we had a geologist, structural engineer in studio, which is a little bit different than what Chad's going to bring to the table today. But he's a fantastic guest. He's a member of FAS3, and I'm going to have him elaborate on that and what it means. He serves on the board for almost 2 years, so he's got a lot of knowledge around this industry. Thanks so much for joining us today, Chad. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
So the board that you serve on, let's just share on that a little bit. FAS3 is obviously an acronym for what it stands for. What does that mean? Can you tell the person listening what that stands for?
Certainly. It's Florida Association of Sinkhole Stabilization Specialists. And it's a group of engineers and contractors in the central Florida area that specialize in, obviously, the investigation and engineering and repair of sinkholes.
And so how does that particular board and that particular organization play a part in Florida with people that have been affected or might be affected in the future by a sinkhole?
Before FAS3 existed, you had all the engineers out there and the contractors doing their own thing. And not to say that they were doing wrong things, but they each kind of had their own way of doing things. And so FAS3 was created so that we could start building some standards that all contractors and engineers, if they so choose, could start working towards, so that we're all working on the same playlist, if you would, and doing things in a very similar fashion, so that everybody, the homeowners alike, can get the best repair.
Is it safe to say that they set up sort of a minimum standards for the industry?
That's the whole reason for being.
Gotcha.
To set up those standards, and those standards have been set up, and so from here it's an education process. We work very hard to try to educate building officials and other engineers and contractors outside of our association, and homeowners especially, and even going in as far as politicians, trying to get the education out there on what it takes to repair a sinkhole.
That piece right there is probably a very, very important part because, as we know, and anyone that's involved with politics in any sort of fashion at all, like, for example, this year I went to Tallahassee with a whole bunch of other realtors, which is different than a real estate agent, right? Kind of like your organization. If you are a member of the Florida and the National Association of Realtors, then you have to abide by a code of ethics. There's certain standards and practices that are required of you as a realtor, which is not the same as any other real estate agent. So it's an important piece that goes to it. And so one of the things we did was we lobbied in Tallahassee for Great American Realtor Days. And what we did was we met with key legislating officials that are decision makers basically around the process and things that affect homeowners, that affect home ownership, things that we are seeing on an everyday level just working in the industry.
We have a very similar role. We definitely have a voice in Tallahassee as an association, and for the same reason, as we want to make sure that as our legislators are trying to write laws that better the coverages and allow the financial stability of insurance companies to exist, we want to make sure they're doing it from a point of education and not a point of hearsay from anybody and everybody.
Right. And, we talked about this before the show. We were talking about how, unfortunately, some of the changes in recent years have made it really impossible for people to obtain sinkhole coverage in some areas.
Yes. About 3 years ago, Senate Bill 408 was passed, and it's taken several years for it to fully be implemented and for the full effects to be felt by homeowners. And we're here now, so that it's in full force. And prior to Senate Bill 408, there was, unfortunately, I don't know if fraud is the right word because it certainly wasn't illegal, but there certainly was a lot of ill use, I would say.
I would agree with that statement, Chad. Ill use is a very good choice of words for what you're about to explain.
Yeah, political correctness at its best here. So there's a lot of people that were making a lot of money at the expense of the insurance companies due to the laws that were in place. And it was creating in a scenario where the insurance companies, including Citizens Insurance, just were not able to put together a fiscal model that was sustainable. So, unfortunately, when Senate Bill 408 went through, it feels like, from my perspective, that the pendulum may have swung a little bit too far. And so we're obviously working towards trying to bring that pendulum back to the middle at this point, to try to make sure that homeowners who need to have sinkhole coverages and need to have sinkhole repairs done and paid for by their policies have that ability to do so.
I totally agree. And, this is where I wish that insurance companies would get creative, right? So you have your homeowner's policy in place, but, anytime, and I use this analogy with regards to cars. So anybody that's ever purchased a new car and has wrecked it or tried to trade it in or any of those type of scenarios, if you didn't purchase gap coverage, which basically protects you for the difference. Like as soon as you drive the car off the lot, right, it's worth less. And if you don't have gap insurance, then you're going to owe money even after the car is totaled. And so I think it would be so beneficial, at least until that legislative is passed, like you say, and the pendulum is not severely shifted towards one side or the other and it's more in the middle. I think a short-term solution might even be to just allow someone to purchase additional insurance that might cover at least a deductible or part of it while, you go through that process, which is not a quick one, right?
It's not. Nothing when it comes to the legislative process is a quick process. It's very difficult because there's many different people and they all have their own wants and needs. And so trying to make everybody happy is difficult. The current legislation that's in place now, Senate Bill 408, it does require a 10% deductible for Citizens Insurance. And that's not 10% of the claim. That's 10% of the policy limit. So if a homeowner
let's talk about that. If someone has a $200,000 dwelling coverage, what does that look like?
If they have a $200,000 dwelling, they're basically their policy limits, then their deductible for the extra sinkhole insurance that can be purchased would be $20,000. So even if the repair itself was only $50,000, they would cover the first $20,000 of it through that 10% deductible. And there's just not that many homeowners out there that have $20,000 laying around, and that's keeping people from even wanting to purchase the coverage. Or if they do purchase the coverage, it makes it difficult for them to even file a claim and be able to work the claim process through.
Definitely. And, the crazy part is it's just, when you think about it from that perspective, the out-of-pocket cost for the person listening is more than half of the cost of the repair, which doesn't sound very fair.
No, it doesn't. I think the intent from the insurance company standpoint was to quell the number of claims being filed. I mean, that was the whole point of Senate Bill 408, was to quell the number of claims, and certainly a 10% deductible will do that.
So you're listening to Tampa Home Talk, and if you missed any part of today's show, you're definitely want to go check it out in its entirety. You can catch us on Facebook, Twitter, and across the web at Tampa Home Talk, and also all of our guest information is on our website, tampahometalk.com. Our off-air number, 813-377-2775, and again, you can call us or text us at 813-377-2775. We have to take a really quick break, but when we come back in a minute, we're going to dive into some of those details of the construction process. We're going to also talk about the difference between grouting and underpinning and what that looks like and how to spot those things if you're out looking for a home right now. We'll be back in just a minute.
Hey, it's Paula, your insurance lady. Our insurance tip of the day is good news. Did you know that there are now 119 insurance companies offering homeowner policies in our state of Florida? That is your insurance tip of the day. Talk to your agent and look out for all the companies because we've got plenty to choose from.
You've heard this before. Interest rates are at all-time record lows. But if your interest rate is 4% or above, you owe it to yourself to call Silverton Mortgage Specialist. Silverton is a direct lender, and the best part about this is that the entire loan process is handled in-house. From application to close, we do it all in the same building, which means that our loans close fast and our clients know what's going on every step of the way. Our contact info is located on tampahometalk.com under Radio Show. What makes Silverton different? Products. We offer VA, FHA, USDA, and conventional loans pricing. Best rates with the lowest closing cost. Process everything in-house. It's handled right here and not outsourced to anyone that no one can reach. This way we can avoid surprises. Our people are simply the best, and we know you'll agree. What will closing Silverton Mortgage Specialist mean to you? A smooth process, real home loan value, and personal attention from real professionals. Silverton Mortgage Specialists are here to serve you. Visit tampahometalk.com under Radio Show for all of our contact details. NMLS 109600 is an equal housing lender and Florida and Georgia residential mortgage licensee.
Hi, this is Melissa Rogers, owner of SEC Inspection Services, where we offer full inspections and insurance inspections. Give us a call at 727-786-4663 or visit us on the web at secinspection.com.
Welcome back. You're listening to Tampa Home Talk. This is your host, Katrina Madewell, on the Real Estate Radio Network. Thank you so much for rejoining the next part of our show. We have in studio today, in case you've missed it, Chad Dudek with Geological. He is an expert with regards to soil settlement, repairs, and just knows a lot about that field. He's been in the industry for 17 years. So if you missed any part of the earlier show or our prior shows where we had geologists on just to talk about the genetic makeup of Florida and so forth, you'll definitely want to check out those shows in their entirety at Tampa Home Talk. We're also on a podcast, tampahometalk.com, Facebook and Twitter at Tampa Home Talk. Our off-air number, in case we can connect you with any of our amazing guests that we have in studio, because they really are experts in their field, 813-377-2775. Again, you can call us or text us on our off-air number, 813-377-2775. 813-377-2775. Welcome back, Chad. Thanks for sticking around through the break.
My pleasure.
So let's continue with our conversation where we left off and talk about some of the differences between grouting and underpinning, because I know you said that's one of the frequently asked questions that you get. As a matter of fact, before we dive into that even better, let's talk about what's some of the best ways to pick a contractor before someone, like let's say they determine that they have settlement issues or sinkhole issues or something that they need to repair or remediate or fix. What's the best way to choose a contractor? Should they go to Angie's List? Is there a list of the state? Where's some resources for the person listening?
Well, you mentioned Angie's List. Angie's List is certainly a place to go, and but I think, obviously I'm slightly biased here, but I believe that the members of FAS3 are probably your top tier contractors and engineers in our industry.
Explain that acronym again, what it stands for, and where. We'll post it on our website at tampahometalk.com, like where they can get to that member resource directory.
Okay, yeah, it's FAS3, which stands for Florida Association of Sinkhole Stabilization Specialists.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So these guys have certain training, they have different standards they have to follow, so that's a great place for them to try to look around and at least interview 3 contractors, give them a call, talk to them. We always say pick the one that gives you the best feeling, right? The one you connect with the best.
Absolutely. It's always has been said that you buy from people that you feel comfortable with, and that's very important. You want to make sure that the contractor certainly has their contractor license, make sure that they do have all their proper insurances in place, checking the Better Business Bureau for that contractor, making sure that they don't have a series of complaints that haven't been taken care of properly. These are all good places to go to. Also, you could even talk with the building department. Sometimes the building department might have something to say about some of the contractors that have difficulties versus don't have difficulties.
Absolutely. You mentioned insurance. What's some of the things people should be looking for? Like what type of insurance and how much?
Well, certainly general liability insurance is very valuable to a homeowner. And the reason for that is if a contractor does something, even if they don't do something wrong intentionally or just not paying attention to the job, but if something goes wrong on the job, then general liability insurance will be there for the homeowner to basically make claim against, to make sure that whatever went wrong through the contractor's actions gets repaired and paid for. So that's very important. The other part is workers' comp, making sure that the company has appropriate workers' comp. If the contractor does not have workers' comp insurance for all of its employees, and an employee that's not covered gets hurt on the job, that employee does have the possibility of suing the homeowner against their homeowner's insurance policy to basically get taken care of.
That's a huge point. Excellent point. And, sometimes I think when people are worried about something that's a bigger issue at hand, they're not thinking about that type of stuff. So that's why we like to have guests like you on the show, just to kind of shed some light on that type of stuff and share on it, so that maybe you've heard this in the car as you're driving home on a Thursday or as you're heading home from the beach on a Saturday afternoon. And we're hoping that, we brought you some good information so that you know where to start should any of this stuff happen.
And that's not just for the sinkhole industry. I would state that for a homeowner, for any time you're having a contractor of any type coming to your home. Many times homeowners go for the lowest dollar sign, and they're maybe hiring someone who doesn't have the proper insurances and licensure, and that's the reason why they can get it at a lesser price. But that lesser price comes at a cost, and that is the cost of taking on liabilities that they shouldn't have to take on.
Now, Chad, for your company to come out and have a look, do you guys offer free estimates to just have a look to see what's going on and try to give someone an idea of what's going on at their property?
We certainly do. We can't come out to the property and just by looking at the property from ground level tell a homeowner, what's causing their problem. We can certainly look at the problem and make some determinations on whether we think that it's due, the cracking or whatever they're seeing is due to erosion of soils, which is not sinkhole related, or if it looks like it's settlement related. We can make some judgments on that, but as it relates to
the structural engineer, right, like the guest we had in our show in previous weeks, he'd probably be a great place to start. It was just kind of a curious question on my part. So
yes, there's not a whole lot that we can do in that area. It requires, in order to determine what would be causing settlement, it requires a significant amount of investigation work from a geotechnical engineer or geologist.
Gotcha. So let's talk about the differences between grouting and underpinning, because I promised that I know when we broke away, and there's a lot of things that we see on a regular basis when I'm out showing property that I want people to at least be aware, especially if it's a bank-owned property and there's no seller's disclosure statement. You need to know some of these things to look for just so you can make a completely informed decision. So the difference between grouting and underpinning, like what do they mean? Where do you start? Dive into what those are, what they look like, what the whole process looks like as far as what they have to go through to do it, but also what it looks like after the fact.
Okay. Well, to start with, I will be very brief on what a sinkhole is, because I know you probably covered that in depth in your previous show.
Yeah, we did, but there might be somebody listening, Chad, that hasn't had a chance to hear that yet, so definitely explain that in brief.
Okay. Basically, a sinkhole is the deterioration of our bedrock. Our bedrock is limestone formation, and one of the main ingredients in limestone is calcium. And unfortunately, here in Florida, our limestone is very broken up. It's not, in most areas, or a lot of areas of Central Florida, it's not a good, solid limestone. Lots of cracks, lots of fissures, and it's referred to as weathered limestone. And we also have a water table that is slightly acidic. And if people go back to high school a little bit here and they remember their science class, they'll know that acid and calcium do not work well together. So our slightly acidic water table in Florida basically dissolves the calcium out of the limestone, and that creates voids, and those voids are sinkhole activity. Those voids are what allow the soils above to settle and what allows the houses sitting on those soils to settle. So that's what we have to repair when we talk about repairing sinkholes. We have to go in and stop that activity and then counteract it and basically make it better. And the only thing that can do that is compaction grouting. So when we talk about repairing a sinkhole and sinkhole activity, we have to perform compaction grouting in order to do that.
Explain what that is, though, in depth.
Okay, compaction grouting is the process of drilling casing, which is pipe, and we typically in the industry use approximately 3-inch diameter pipe. We drill that down to the limestone level, which can be anywhere from, say, 30 feet to 130 feet in this area. And we do that every 10 feet all the way around the perimeter of the home. And then we go in with...
and this is what most people refer to as concrete, right? When they say pumping concrete under your home?
Yes. Once we get all this pipe drilled into the ground, now we're going to hook very large diesel-powered pumps up to it, and we're going to pump grout, which is very close to concrete. It just is not nearly as strong. It flows a lot easier and doesn't have as much aggregate in it. But you can basically think of it as concrete, and we pump that down through the casing, through these pipes, all the way down to the limestone level. And what we're trying to do is to literally cover the limestone underneath that home as much as possible with a layer of grout. And the purpose of that is to basically put a barrier between the acidic water table and the limestone itself, so that deterioration and dissolution of calcium within the limestone can no longer take place. And that arrests the sinkhole activity at that point. After we basically have reached pressure, we're monitoring the pressure as we pump. As we reach pressure, we start pulling the casing up out of the ground, and we continue pumping grout into the soil profile now. And what we're trying to do with is to...
Chad, help me understand that these are kind of like pylons almost that you're pumping under the ground, and obviously it's going to go wherever the voids are. Is that right?
Right. Keep in mind that this is just like concrete, so it is, when it's wet, it is fluid, so it is flowing path of least resistance. So we're not building a very cylindrical column of grout. We're pumping it under pressure, and it is traveling and pushing the soils and going path of least resistance, which is the right thing to do because we want to re-densify all the soils under there. So we want the grout to flow and to compact in the areas where they are the softest.
And it's a pretty interesting process, actually. If you want to, if you're a visual person or a visual learner and you want to kind of see what Chad is talking about, I would encourage you to check out our website, tampahometalk.com, because I'm going to post some links to Geological site. Chad has some information, some YouTube videos, and some visual diagrams to kind of go over some of the things that he's talking about.
Yeah, that's always very helpful. I was in hopes that we would be able to send people there. And there's other places other than my website that can also supply great information on this and provide more visuals.
And we're happy to, if you want to pass along that information, we can certainly put it on our website at tampahometalk.com so that people can get that information there and basically be able to further just understand what they're looking at. So you were talking about, so that's what you're explaining right now is the compaction grouting, or the, what people would call the concrete trucks, right? Driven past the house.
That's correct. So we basically continue to pull that pipe up until we, at each interval, which is every couple feet, and we'll pull up 2 more feet, and we'll pump, and we'll pull up 2 more feet, and we'll pump until we basically get to essentially back up to the surface. And we do that on every point, every 10 feet, all the way around the house, to basically get that layer of grout across the entirety of the limestone and to redensify the soils beneath the home.
And so when you explain that with regards to grouting, underpinning is a completely different process.
Completely different process. Underpinning, first of all, let me finish with compaction grouting is a sinkhole repair. So it repairs the soils, it repairs the limestone, and it arrests the sinkhole activity, the dissolution of calcium within the limestone formation. It does nothing to repair the home.
That makes total sense. And I know that you're going to get into underpinning in just a second. And when we spoke before the show, you actually gave a fantastic analogy with regards to just everyday life. And I'm hoping that you will share that whenever we come back in just a minute after the break. You're listening to Tampa Home Talk. We're going to take a real quick break here with our guest, Chad Dudek with Geological. When we come back, he's going to finish up that conversation regarding the difference between grouting and underpinning. Back in a minute.
Hi, this is Melissa Rogers, owner of SEC Inspection Services. We're so glad that you're listening today, that we're offering you a special deal. If you're purchasing a home, you can have $50 off your full home inspection. And if you're already a client of ours, we're offering 10% off of any other service that we offer. Just give us a call at 727-786-4663 or visit us on the web at secinspection.com.
You've heard this before. Interest rates are at all-time record lows. But if your interest rate is 4% or above, you owe it to yourself to call Silverton Mortgage Specialist. Silverton is a direct lender, and the best part about this is that the entire loan process is handled in-house. From application to close, we do it all in the same building, which means that our loans close fast and our clients know what's going on every step of the way. Our contact info is located on tampahometalk.com under Radio Show. What makes Silverton different? Products. We offer VA, FHA, USDA, and conventional loans pricing. Best rates with the lowest closing costs. Process everything in-house. It's handled right here and not outsourced to anyone that no one can reach. This way we can avoid surprises. Our people are simply the best, and we know you'll agree. What will closing Silverton Mortgage Specialist mean to you? A smooth process, real home loan value, and personal attention from real professionals. Silverton Mortgage Specialists are here to serve you. Visit tampahometalk.com under Radio Show for all of our contact details. NMLS 109600 is an equal housing lender and Florida and Georgia residential mortgage licensee.
Welcome back. Thanks for chiming back in here to us today on Tampa Home Talk. Our studio guest today is Chad Dudek with Geological. If you missed the earlier part of our show, you're definitely going to want to check the entire show out, and we'll post the link for that on our website at tampahometalk.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and across the web at Tampa Home Talk. All of our shows are available via a podcast, so certainly if you're just getting into the car or catching up, we were talking about some of the science that goes behind sinkholes and, you know, how to pick a good contractor and how to tell the difference, and the difference between grouting and underpinning, which is where we left off at the last segment. He explained what grouting was, and we're just about ready to dive into underpinning. So, Chad, if you don't mind just kind of recapping real quick what you were talking about, and then share that analogy that you gave me.
Compaction grouting essentially is trying to arrest the sinkhole activity, fixing the soils and fixing the limestone and arresting the activity with the dissolution of calcium within that limestone formation.
So the cause. You're going after the cause.
We're going after the cause. It's not doing anything for the home itself. So if you have damage to the home, that's where underpinning can come into play. Another place for underpinning is when it's not sinkhole activity, which is down in the limestone. It's, you know, if you have soil problems that are up in the shallow soil, up in the upper 10, 15 feet, let's say, where you have clay material that might be shrinking and swelling. You might have organic material that is decomposing. Lots of different reasons why homes can settle. If you have shallow soil problems, or if you do have a deeper condition like sinkhole activity that's been arrested through compaction grouting, and your home has damage to it in the form of cracks that are rising to a structural level of cracking, not just a cosmetic level.
Right, so at this point, you're talking about things that are actually, like you're actually compromising the integrity of the home. So they're cracks that are serious enough to undermine the structure.
Exactly, and that's a real important note, is that just because a home has cracks in it, hairline in nature, that does not call into question underpinning. Most homes in the state of Florida have hairline cracks on them. That's just the nature of having shallow footings, being supported by sands.
That's right. So if you pull up carpet in any home or any flooring, you're going to see cracks in the concrete.
It's very likely to see cracks in the concrete and possibly even cracks in your exterior walls. But as long as they're hairline in nature and they're compressed together, that's not something that should be alarming to anybody. It's when you have cracks that are actually open that you could like take a dime and stick that dime into the crack and be able to move that dime in and out of the crack. Or if you have a crack to where they're no longer level. So when you rub your hand across the crack, you actually feel a lip. If you start seeing those types of movement in the cracks, then that's also something that is something for a little bit more concern. So that's the kind of damage we're talking about. And that's where underpinning comes into play. Underpinning does absolutely nothing to repair the soils or to arrest sinkhole activity. All it does is it wants to bypass soil problems and basically supply foundation support to the footing by bypassing shallow soil problems and going all the way down to the limestone and providing foundation support off the limestone.
So explain what that process is like for underpinning. Like for the person listening, let's talk about what does that look like? Like what do you do in lay terms?
Essentially, we're going to take our underpinning pipe, which is, again, approximately 3 inches in diameter, and we're going to drill or push that pipe all the way down to limestone. We're basically right up against the house, right at the foundation, and we're going to drive that all the way down to limestone. And then we're going to attach that pipe to the foundation, to the footing, with a bracket system, a steel bracket system. And then we're going to use hydraulics to basically lift and as much as possible level the home and lock that bracket off, maintaining the house at the elevation that we need it to be at.
So and I know you were talking about, you gave me some great analogies before the show. You were talking about a chair, right? Or some type of little like support bracket, right?
Right. For a visual, as much as I can provide, the bracket that I'm referring to basically looks like a chair, where the horizontal portion of the chair where basically you would sit, that goes up underneath the footing, and then the vertical leg of the bracket, like the back of a chair, goes up against the side of the footing, and of course we use that vertical leg as the bolting area where we bolt the bracket to the footing, attaching it to the footing. And then basically there's a bunch of weldments on that bracket that allow the pipe to come up through it and attach.
And you were talking about, it was interesting. I loved your analogy when you were talking about why you wouldn't just underpin versus grout first. And talk about how you explain this to the people that you come into contact with.
I don't know if I remember the analogy. Are you referring to the developer and the vacant land?
Well, no, you're talking about cause versus symptom. And you said that, you remember where we talked about this yesterday?
Yes, I do. Yes, in our society, and for especially Western medicine, it seems that our medicine has gone in the direction of basically focusing mostly on symptoms and not necessarily going as much after the cause of what might be ailing somebody. And so we can relate that back to this scenario where underpinning is basically fixing a symptom. There is something that is causing the home to settle. Underpinning does nothing to basically stop that cause or to arrest that cause. It only is going after the symptom, which is your home that is settled and is cracked.
So it's kind of like saying, I get migraines frequently, and here I'm going to give you some medicine to help with those migraines, but we're not going to actually figure out what's triggering those migraines.
Correct.
And sometimes the migraines can be a sign of something that's majorly wrong.
That is correct. So obviously, from my position, I much prefer going after the cause and making sure that we're addressing the cause, and then, if necessary, addressing the symptom later if that's a permanent symptom, like a crack in your home. So with underpinning only affecting the symptom, the balance to that equation is that compaction grouting only affects the cause. It does not address the symptom if your home has a lot of cracking to it.
Which is huge. I mean, that's a huge takeaway that I'm hoping anyone listening can just, if it at least help them understand the difference in the two with that analogy, then we've certainly done our job for the show. Can you talk about some symptoms and, not symptoms, sorry. We were just talking about cause and effect symptoms. But when you talk about, a lot of times we will go out and we will look at properties and we will see properties that also have, markings on the outside. And so I want you to share on some of those things so that if a person is looking at a bank-owned property, they can understand if it's had a sinkhole repair or maybe if it hasn't. So can you talk about some of those signs and things to look at, things that maybe might need a repair or things to indicate that it's already had a repair?
Well, certainly, as far as looking for symptoms, whether you own a home or you're wanting to sell a home, buy a home, anytime you see cracks in the exterior walls or cracks in porches, cracks in pool decks, driveways, things of that nature, those are things that you want to, at least take a stronger look at. And I go back to the using a dime in the crack and the unlevelness of cracks. Those types of issues are things that you definitely want to pay attention to. If doors and windows don't necessarily close properly or open and close properly, then that means that there's something has happened to the frame surrounding that opening, that door, that window, and that could be a sign that the house has shifted in some way. So those cracks and doors and windows are the biggest and the easiest to see. That could cause some concern, or at least make you want to do a little bit more investigation.
And so if someone's looking at a home and there's these circular little areas all the way around the home, that's a sign it's been grouted? Is that right?
Correct. If you're wanting to look for symptoms, then it might have already been repaired. You have compaction grouting, which basically when you're looking at the driveway, you're looking at the front porch, you're looking at the back porch, like a pool deck or even just a back porch area. You're looking for basically circle marks in the concrete that are about 6 inches in diameter that look like 6 inches of that concrete's been pulled out and then been replaced with a patch. That basically are the holes that we have to put in the concrete in order to drill that casing, that pipe, all the way down to limestone. So if you see those types of circles all the way around the concrete, around the perimeter of the home, then it very likely has been compaction grouted. For underpinning...
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Well, for underpinning, we have to do much more extensive cutting of that concrete because we actually need to excavate down and put a man down by the footing. So we open up 3-foot square holes in the concrete. So typically those are very well patched whenever we're done and covered with tile or some kind of a coating that tries to help cover that. But sometimes it's not, and you can just see these large 3-foot square cuts that have been patched. So you see something like that, you know that it's very likely it's been underpinned.
You know, how many, and you guys measure, when you talk about grouting, right, or the concrete trucks, as people like to refer them to, you guys measure that in cubic foot, is that right? Like how many cubic yards that you need?
Correct, cubic yards.
Yards, sorry.
Each truck that you see running down the road with the big concrete barrels on them, those are typically 10-yard trucks. So there's 10 cubic yards on each one of those trucks. And an average-size home with an average sinkhole problem is likely going to take somewhere between 15 to 20 trucks. That's fairly typical.
And how long is that process? Like, does that happen over a couple of days, or is that several days?
Some projects last longer than others, and it's very much dependent on the nature of the soils and how well they accept the grout. But typically, you're going to pump about 3 to 4 trucks a day. So if it ends up being 16 trucks, it could be anywhere from 4, 5, 6 days, something like that.
So help me understand, if we were to have, let's say 15, we'll use the middle number, right? We have 10, 15, 20 yards of concrete grout. What area could that fill? If we had 15 cubic yards, how much land mass does that fill? Like, does that fill a swimming pool?
Oh, certainly.
So more than
certainly.
A swimming
pool? You have to look at it from a standpoint of 1 cubic yard of grout is 3 foot. It's a cube, 3 foot by 3 foot by 3 foot. So if you take 10 of those and put them together, that's one truck. So that now all of a sudden you're talking about 30 feet by 30 feet by 30 feet.
So technically, it's enough to fill an entire house.
Yes. Yes.
I wanted
I have to put pen to paper to give you exactly what it would be looking like. Yes, it's a lot.
I'm trying to get the person listening, Chad, to get an idea of actually how much material that is, because I know it's not exactly a cheap process, and we have to take another quick break. But when we come back, stick around, because this is going to be the best segment of the show. We're going to talk about the cost of some of these repairs, and is a sinkhole home better than a non-sinkhole home? And if so, or if not, how much of a difference in cost and value does that home have? We're going to talk about those things when we come back in just a minute. Stick around.
Hi, this is Aaron Davis, owner of Hillsborough Title. Hillsborough Title is a local, family-owned title agency here in Tampa Bay. Our service, strength, and knowledge make us different. We've served Tampa Bay area for over 30 years. From Polk County to the Gulf, Pasco to Manatee, Tampa Bay, we've got you covered. Call us at 813-712-8888 or visit us on the web at thebesttitle.com. That's thebesttitle.com.
Hi, this is Melissa Rogers, owner of SEC Inspection Services, where we offer full inspections and insurance inspections. Give us a call at 727-786-4663 or visit us on the web at secinspection.com.
Welcome back. This afternoon, you're listening to Tampa Home Talk on the Real Estate Radio Network. We have our special guest today, Chad Dudek with Geological. Amazing history and background, just with the knowledge that he brings to the table, over 17 years of experience in the soil and settlement type industry. And he handles a lot of sinkhole repair claims. We talked all about grouting and underpinning. We talked about the differences between those and so many other things. So if you missed any part of today's show, definitely check the show out in its entirety. And you can do so by going to our website at tampahometalk.com. We are also on Facebook, Twitter, and across the web. Just search for Tampa Home Talk. We'll post all of our prior shows, the whole thing, via a podcast. So just hop right on iTunes or whatever your podcast player is and search for Tampa Home Talk. We'll pop right up there and you can listen to the entire show. So before we had to break, we were talking about, and earlier in the show, actually, we talked about the insurance and how a lot of the changes that were made to Senate Bill, is it 408, is that correct?
Senate Bill 408.
Yeah, how it's made a lot of changes to the insurance and the way things basically work. So if a consumer or someone listening, let's say they had their insurance company and they would not pay for it, or they had sinkhole exclusion, meaning it's not included on their policy, all they have is the catastrophic ground collapse, right? Which, feel free to dive into what classifies catastrophic ground collapse. But let's talk about what that cost would be to a homeowner if they had to pay it out of pocket, not only to grout but to underpin. And we were talking about how much concrete grout that stuff is, like how much, like as far as it could fill a whole house, how much. So
Right.
back up and just dive into those things. Like talk about the first part where I was saying the getting into the before the cost. Dive into what that looks like and what you go into next.
Well, as far as the cost is concerned, it's always difficult to say because some homes will only take 50 yards of grout and other homes might take 250, 300, 350 yards of grout. So it's difficult to say that what it's going to be. But I can tell you that an average across the board for my company has been approximately $85,000 for the repair process. And that's just what the portion I do with geological, which is the underground portion of the work. The engineer still has to be paid for, which could be another $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, and the cosmetic repairs to the home have to still be done by a contractor.
And that's a general average, right, in that neighborhood?
Yes, and that cosmetic, that could be anywhere from $10,000 to $50,000 itself. So that's kind of the nature of the averages, and they can go much higher than that, and they can go much lower, of course.
I mean, just the test alone to determine what's underneath the house is expensive.
That's correct. The engineering that has to be done, which includes ground-penetrating radar and deep drilling all the way down to the limestone with several different borings, that can cost as much as $10,000 to $12,000 all by itself.
It's, and what I lost my train of thought at the beginning part of the show, but with the catastrophic ground collapse, it's crazy, but the county has to actually come in and declare your home inhabitable, meaning you can't live in it. It's dangerous.
That's correct. There's several things that have to happen in order for the catastrophic portion of the policy to come into effect. And one of the first things is you have to have a dropout. You have to have a visual depression in the ground that is affecting the structure. And not only that depression has to take place in a short amount of time. And I think typically it's not exactly defined what short amount of time means, but I think my interpretation of it is it has to happen in hours, not days or weeks or years. So depression in the ground that affects the home, and it has to happen fairly quickly. And then also the home has to be deemed uninhabitable. So basically the building official has to come out and put a note on the door saying that you can't stay in your home any longer. And there's a couple other criteria as well. So it makes it really difficult to get that portion of the policy to come into play.
The crazy part is, too, listening to you just talk about it has to happen within hours. I mean, that's just nuts. If you go back and you listen to the show where we had the geologist in studio, he will tell you that most of the time it's a process that happens over time. Like, that's what he shared. It's not something that's typically going to happen within hours. I mean, there's always exceptions, right, where it will happen, but it would be rare.
That's correct. There's two main types of sinkholes. There's subsidence sinkholes, and there are catastrophic dropout sinkholes. And, the dropouts are the ones that we're referring to as far as catastrophic coverages are concerned. And those, I don't know the percentages per se, but a lot of people just refer to those as the 1%ers.
Gotcha.
They just don't happen.
Right.
They just don't happen very, very often. It's mostly subsidence sinkholes, and those do take time.
Yeah, they're the needle in the haystack, basically.
Right.
So just out of curiosity, since we were talking about cost, like if someone, and I'm sure obviously you can't, this is not a project you could undertake on your own. You have to go through all the proper motions and steps. But just if you had to get, 10 to 15 truckloads of this grout, what's the cost on something like that? Like just the materials alone, not to mention the labor for the people to drive the truck and pump in the ground.
You're asking for my material costs?
Yeah, like I'm curious to know, because I'm sure that makes up a huge part of that repair cost.
Certainly. It's approximately $100 per cubic yard, so each truck is about $1,000.
So we were talking about, you said it might be 33,000 just for a rough idea as far as cubic yards. 33. Do I have that right, or am I messing it up?
No, well, like I said, it depends completely on the project at hand, on how many trucks we're going to have to bring in. But the material cost on a 150,000 on a 150 yard
concrete truck.
On 150, yes, that would be about $15,000.
That's what I was thinking. I mean, it has to be in the neighborhood of 15,000 on up, right? I mean, I'm sure there's cases where it could cost $20 or $30 or $50,000.
Correct, and some people might say, well, $15,000 for the materials, but you're charging $60,000 for the project. There is a substantial amount of labor that is required to do these things, and that's only the grout material. We still have to drill the casing into the ground. We have to pull the casing out of the ground. We have to have heavy equipment to pump the grout. So there's lots of things that go into it. But, yeah, the material costs are significant.
Plus, you have to pay the people that are physically driving the stuff there and putting it in the ground. I mean, they have to be trained in that type of stuff.
Absolutely.
So just trying to, break down the process a little bit and talk about what goes into that, because I don't think people explain that stuff enough. So the ultimate question, right, and we get this all the time, is a sinkhole home better than a non-sinkhole home? Or people will ask us, would you live in a home that has a sinkhole? So I'm going to ask you that, being our expert guest in studio today. If someone asks you those questions, how do you answer them?
I would feel, depending on what engineer put forth the engineering, what contractor did the repair, and what basically the scenario was, then yes, I absolutely would live in a sinkhole home. I would have no problem whatsoever if I knew that a proper repair was put forth by the engineer and the contractor came in and did that repair to a level where the engineer signed off on it. Absolutely, I would live in it.
And so, I mean, I know we'll see this, different times in different neighborhoods that are more sinkhole-prone areas than others. You may see a home that's been fully repaired by a sinkhole, and another one that hasn't been. And so, talk about that, because I know you and I shared on this before the show.
Yes, absolutely. A lot of people ask me that question. If there's two homes that are almost identical across the street from each other, one's been repaired by sinkhole conditions, and one has not, which one would you buy? And my statement is the same limestone that is sitting underneath the home that had sinkhole conditions is also sitting underneath the home that has not displayed those conditions yet. It's the same limestone, and it's the same water table. So the same conditions exist under both homes that can allow sinkhole activity to take place. So I preface the question with that type of statement, and then people can make their own decisions on whether they would rather have one that's repaired or one that could be susceptible to the necessity for repair in the future. And with insurance coverage the way it is today after Senate Bill 408, there's not a whole lot of opportunity to get insurance dollar signs to help pay for that.
Excellent point. Excellent. And they're marking where there have been sinkholes and where there haven't been. They're starting to record these things in public records. So all of those type of things are going to play a part. And if the insurance company is even going to write a sinkhole inclusion on your policy.
That's correct. The insurance companies have a right to inspect your home before they supply you with the extra subsidence sinkhole coverage. And they have gone a long way to basically make it difficult to get coverage. So if you have any cracks in the driveway, pool deck, sidewalks, if you even have a hairline crack in an exterior wall of your home, it's very likely that the insurance company is going to deny coverage for that extra subsidence sinkhole coverage. So it makes it difficult.
Thank you so much. You have shared information and knowledge today with our listener that's really invaluable. I think you did an excellent job explaining the difference between grouting and underpinning and just what goes into the process and how expensive it actually is. Chad Dudek with Geological, thanks so much for joining us today for Tampa Home Talk.
My pleasure.
If you missed any part of today's show and you want to catch it out in its entirety, or maybe even want to connect with Chad, feel free to call our office at our off-air number, 813-377-2775. You can call us or text us at 813-377-2775. 2775. Of course, we do the radio stuff for fun. Our main job is selling real estate. But if we can connect you with Chad or any of our other guests, call us again at 813-377-2775. Again, the whole show is available via a podcast, and we're on Facebook, Twitter, and across the web at Tampa Home Talk. Thanks so much. This week, we are out.